What's going on, guys? Lee Hauk with Tooth of the Arrow Broadheads here, and today we're doing an arrow build with the brand new The Arrow from Tooth of the Arrow. This is going to be a fun one. These arrows do everything. I've been shooting them for a few months now. They're durable, they penetrate, and they last. And most importantly, they fly very well, especially at long range. I've been shooting these with fixed blade broadheads, the Tooth of the Arrow, all models. I've tested all models out to well over 100 yards. These arrows just do it all. So I just got some brand new 350 spine and 300 spines here, and I'm going to take these 300 spines and build them up as my personal arrow, and I'm going to take you guys with me for the whole ride. You can learn arrow building the way I do it right here, right now. So the very first thing is you need to make sure you know what your arrow length is going to be, and you kind of have your arrow building formula or roadmap set and in place. Now I'm going to link another video up here about how to do that. I love spine matching. If you're into that and you know what that is, go ahead and do your normal spine matching process. If you don't really know where to start with an arrow build, watch this video up here. It's a very, very simple method to find a near perfect arrow build for your setup, and then come back here for the building portion. Once you've done that, you have to make the decision of if you want an arrow wrap or not. An arrow wrap is essentially a sticker that we put along the back end of the arrow and then put our fletching onto that. It has a few benefits. The main one being if you ever need to refletch, it's easy to peel it off and have a clean slate to work with underneath rather than scraping glue and fletching off an arrow. It can get kind of messy having to do that. So an arrow wrap prevents that, and it increases your visibility both in flight, on impact, and when you're trying to find your arrow. Either you lost one or it went through an animal, hopefully, and it can really help with visibility and finding your arrow after a shot. So I'm going to put an arrow wrap on these. I recommend that you do, but you absolutely don't have to. Ultimately, it's not going to impact your performance at all. Okay, so there's a few things you need here. First of all, a clean working surface, which this is very well used arrow mat, so it's a little dusty. But start with a clean working surface, and if you're going to use an arrow wrap, you need this material. This is an arrow building mat, but all it really is a mouse pad material just on a really large scale. If you don't have one of these, just get a normal mouse pad. That's what most people use. Then you need your arrow wraps. So I'm going to go with these longer ones. I've been enjoying these lately. Or of course, you can get your Let Off Signature Series arrow wraps from Perth County Archery. So the first thing to do is you need to realize that your arrows are going to be very dirty as they come out of the factory. We actually do clean these before we send them to you, but the nature of arrows is that manufacturing them is a very dirty process, and you're just not going to be able to get them completely clean until the moment you start building them. So paper towel and some rubbing alcohol is what you're going to need. So just get some rubbing alcohol on your paper towel and scrub down the back portion of that shaft where you're going to put your wrap. See, we clean ours before we send them to you, so there's not much on there, but some shafts are just filthy. The nice thing about rubbing alcohol too is that it dries very quickly. So by the time I'm done scrubbing all these down, the first ones will already be dry and ready to go. This is a very important step that you do not want to skip. If you skip this, your arrow wraps will not stick and they will probably peel off. So whether you're applying an arrow wrap or not, this is a step you have to do. Because if you're just going with a vein directly onto the carbon, you still need to get rid of this carbon dust and the carbon residue from manufacturing. So now that these are all clean, my next step is going to be to apply an arrow wrap. If you're going to fletch directly onto carbon, your next step is to put your nocks on, but I'll get to that after I put my wrap on. So to apply your arrow wrap, you need to have the clean surface of a mouse pad material. That squishiness is absolutely essential. So what I'm going to do is take my arrow wrap, try not to touch the sticky side, and I'm going to lay it down upside down, sticky side up. Adjust it however you need so that you can lay your arrow down and have full clearance all the way to the end. Once you start this process, you do not want to stop. So what I'm going to do is, I like to go top down. Some people like to go bottom up. But I'm going to line up my arrow wrap right on the end of the shaft here. I get right over top of it and look real close. And I'm gonna have this arrow shaft sitting just a hair above the arrow wrap, lined up perfectly at the end here. And I have probably a millimeter or 1.5 millimeters of space between the shaft and the wrap all the way along, that I can see that the shaft is perfectly parallel with the wrap. And I'm holding quite tight pressure here because I don't want this to move. Once you're confident you've got it lined up here and perfectly parallel, I'm going to press down on it quite firm across the whole thing, and very quickly in one motion I'm going to roll it on like that. And I'll roll it out a little bit just to make sure it really adheres well. And then right on the seam, I'm just going to apply a line of pressure like that. So I'll do one more with you guys here on camera. It's definitely a little bit harder with these longer wraps. These shorter ones, which are, I mean, almost half the length, are much easier to work with, but same process either way. So I'm going to line it up. I first focus on this side. And then once I know it's good there, I focus on getting it parallel. And I'll even make some small adjustments once I put my hand down here. And once it's perfect, a quick roll, just like that. Now, most companies are going to send you 13 or 14 wraps just in case you mess one up. It happens to all of us. Don't worry about it. So how nice does that look? Hey, I just love the white on white. The white is especially good for seeing what your hit looks like and reading that blood. That's why I go white on white. I'm going to use a white Nock and white veins too. It's just such a clean look. So the next step will be to put your Nocks on. Now the Nocks that we include with the arrow are going to fit really well. But if you're using a different brand, sometimes you might find that a Nock doesn't quite want to go in very easily, or it's really tight. If that's the case, you can take just some bowstring wax and put a little bit of bowstring wax around the Nock, and that'll help it go in. But 9 times out of 10 or more, you should be able to just put the Nock directly in. So there's literally nothing to it. I don't worry about spine alignment or anything. Just plug your Nock in and call it a day. Make sure it seats all the way. It takes a bit of pressure, but don't do this because you will probably break a Nock doing that. If you really want to go hard with the aesthetics of your build, you can align your Nocks before you fletch so that the arrow labels are all facing the same way, but I don't worry about that for my own. So now the next thing that we have to do is fletch. I mean, if you want to cut first, you can do that, but I typically fletch at this point. After you've put your arrow wrap on, you need to clean the wrap again, just like we cleaned the shaft the first time, because after all that messing around, some of the oils from your hands are definitely going to be on those shafts. So we want to make sure we get that off. So just like we did the first time, some rubbing alcohol, and you're going to scrub down each of those wraps. Now, I'm not going to do it to all of these because I don't want you guys to be here with me all day watching this. So I will focus on this arrow for now and do the rest of these later. So now that this is cleaned, we're moving to fletching. You can use whatever fletching device you want. I did a Bitzenberger fletch job in my last arrow building video, which I'll link up here. So I'm going to do something different today and use this Goat Tough Arrow Fletcher. I've actually been really enjoying this thing. It's quite simple, but it's really precise and I can do a good job. So there's a lot of pieces here. I have a 3 fletch and a 4 fletch option. For this build, I'm going to go with a 4 fletch. So I'm going to go with an Atlas vein from Boning. In my mind, this is a Blazer replacement. It's a little bit lower profile, but longer and the same material. I've been using these pre-primed, which is a key feature that I love about a vein, and these are awesome. So that's what I'm going with. It requires one of these longer plates. I'm going to go with a 1 degree helical, which is plenty when you're doing a 4 fletch, especially on a longer vein, but the options are endless. Sometimes with these plastic clamps, which are really common on a lot of fletching jigs, you're going to get some glue buildup. So I just have a knife. This is just meant for scraping glue. And I will just go in and make sure it's clear. Scrape off any off the top without shaving away plastic. And then make sure there's no glue or plastic residue hanging around that's going to interrupt your glue job. Now, when they're fresh out of the package and they're pre-primed, I don't have a need to scrub down the base. But if your veins have been kicking around for a while or you've accidentally touched them with your finger, once you get the vein placed in your clamp, it's a good idea to take a Q-tip or a cotton swab and some rubbing alcohol and scrape down the base of that vein. I don't find that necessary when they're fresh out of the package. So I'm going to put a vein in there like that, ready to go. This particular fletching system, this would be the 4-fletch option, so I clip my Nock into there. I know this is very specific to this fletching jig, but the principle behind all fletching jigs is the same thing. So the first thing to do, no matter what fletching jig you're using, is select a good glue. This is my go-to, just Gorilla Super Glue. This stuff is awesome. What I'm going to do is carefully place like 3 dots of glue along the base there of that vein. And then I take something pointy. Today it happens to be a screw, and I'm going to spread out that glue evenly, make sure that it's covering the entire base of that vein, but that there's no globs or spots where it's going to build up. So once you've got that, and this is, this is for every fletching jig, that's the way that I would go about applying your glue. I'm going to put it in position. Now this is the real key piece here. This is clean. The key piece is even adhesion all the way. So I'm going to put my fingers just on either side of where that vein is underneath the shaft there and press down evenly and quite hard. I want this vein adhesion to be perfect, and it needs to be consistent. Basically, your vein is a suction cup, and if you don't create that suction, it's going to peel off instantly. So you got to press hard and make sure that you're squeezing any air out from underneath. And the higher the helical you're going with, like if you're doing a 3-degree helical on a blazer vein, you've really got to be careful about this, because the higher the helical, the more difficult it is to get that suction. It's not impossible, it's just more difficult, and you got to pay attention. So after a good 15 seconds of constant pressure, I'm going to lift up and see how it looks. What I usually do is I'll press down along the whole thing and see if any air bubbles come out. Hopefully they don't. This looks perfect. And I also don't have any excess glue coming out either side, which tells me I did a good job. If you put too much glue on, you're going to have glue squeezing out. And it's no problem. You just wipe it off. Just use less for next time. So now we're going to do that same thing again. And on this style of fletching jig, I'm going to be really careful that I'm not getting glue on the plastic. So I'm going to wipe it off each time. So we're just going to do that exact same thing 3 more times and then 11 more times. So again, I'm pressing down all along the base of the vein there just to make sure that no glue is coming out or that there's no air bubbles. That tells me that I did a good job and got good adhesion and that suction is truly formed. This is definitely a tedious and slow process. To fletch all 12 of these is going to take me some time. What I usually do is I get the iPad going, turn on a baseball game or a hockey game, and I just fletch away. But you don't want to do anything that's going to take your mind too far away from fletching, because you want to do a really good job. If you do this right, these veins are going to last the life of the arrows. If you make a mistake, you're going to be peeling an arrow wrap off and starting from scratch real soon. So there we have it. A perfectly fletched arrow. At this point, what I'll do is I'll take my glue and at the very back of each vein, just put a dot of glue right at the base, and then the same thing on the front. This is called tipping and tailing, and this helps a lot with pass-throughs or pulling arrows out of stuff. It's just a really good safety measure to keep those veins lasting even longer. So there you have it. That's what my vein setup is going to look like for the year. So the next phase here is cutting your arrows. This is something you can take to a shop and have them do, or if you have an arrow saw, it's so easy to do on your own. Again, just a few fundamentals that you must follow. First is measure twice, cut once. So I know that this is my length. I know that this is perfect, but you have to really make sure you're measuring. Now, when you're actually cutting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be spinning the arrow in this direction towards me. So thumb down towards me. And I'm going to be applying constant back pressure to that nock in the nock holder there to make sure that that arrow never slips forward. So it's going to be constantly backwards and thumb down nock towards me like that. And I'm just going to slowly work just like this. I'm going to slowly work the shaft into the blade. Once it cuts off, I'm going to very carefully, still with pressure being applied that way, run the face of the arrow shaft along the blade, and that's going to help square it off. It's not going to perfectly square it, but it's going to help. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all these here. Make sure that you're being safe about this, and make sure that you have a vacuum hookup, because carbon dust is just horrible for you. You don't want to breathe it in, and this makes a lot of dust. So now they're all cut. There's going to be so much carbon dust inside of these things. One thing I actually like to do is I'll take 6 at a time, and with my vacuum, I'm going to put them in here like this and create a suction with my hand. And that's not going to get all the dust out, but it's sure going to help. Okay, so now is time to glue your inserts, but there's some really important steps we can't skip here. First thing is that I'm going to use a 2-part slow set epoxy. So this is a 24-hour epoxy. Make sure you're not using one of the quick set 5-minute epoxies. And I'm going to start mixing it up right away because I want it to stiffen a little bit before I actually start gluing. So I'm going to mix it now and let it sit while I do the next step to prep these shafts for gluing. Okay, there's my epoxy mixed. I'm just going to let that sit off to the side over there. Now the next thing is you have to clean the inside of your shafts. These are going to be so dirty after what we just did to them over on the arrow saw. If you don't clean these out, it's going to be the same thing as if you don't clean your shaft before putting a vane on. The adhesion is just not going to work, and that's especially bad when we're talking about inserts. So what I do is a little bit of rubbing alcohol in the cap there. And then I take some Q-tips, and I'm going to go through quite a few here. So I just buy them in bulk. First side, wet Q-tip. As far down into the shaft as your insert is going to go, I'm going to scrub it out. And look at all that comes out. And then the next time around with the dry side, go back in there and pick up any residue. But you see, we got it really clean there. So that one's good. And then I'll take the dry side of that one. Now it's the wet side. So we're going to do that again. Scrubbing all the way around the inside like that. Super dirty, but the vacuuming did help. Now a fresh dry one. And it's quite clean. So I'm going to do that to all of these right now. That is so important. Okay, so now all of these shafts are clean on the inside, and because it's rubbing alcohol, it doesn't take very long for the inside of those shafts to dry. But I will give this a little bit of time 5 minutes is typically plenty. So the next thing that you got to ask yourself is, what kind of insert are you using? Are you going to go with something that has an external component? Like when I take this half out, this is what comes with the arrow, for example. There's an external component to it versus this, which is what I'm going to use. This is a brass hit insert. When I put this in, there's nothing that's going to be exposed. And the reason you have to figure this out beforehand is because that tells you when you need to square your shaft. So squaring your arrow shafts is a really, really important concept. You need to make sure that the ends of these shafts are perfectly square before you glue, if you're using something with an external component, or if you're using a hidden insert, you can go ahead and do it after. Squaring and spinning is very simple, but you need a tool for it. This is my preferred tool. This is the arrow preparation system from Nock. With this, I can spin and square. So this is my squaring part here that I'm just going to pop off for now. And this is what you're going to have to do to every single shaft. So we'll take one right now and just see how this works. Pretend I'm using this as my insert or half out. We're going to take a broadhead that we know is perfectly square, and we're going to dry fit it. Make sure it's really on there. And then I'm going to spin this and see if there's any wobble whatsoever in the tip. See how there's a lot of wobble there in the tip? That would mean that I need to square this off before I glue. Sometimes off the arrow saw, it will be square, but you can't rely on that. This is absolutely not good enough, and this arrow is going to require squaring. But since I'm using a hit insert, I can glue my hit inserts and worry about squaring after. This is just so important. If you're using any half out or insert system that has an exposed piece, that you do this now before you glue, because there is no going back if you glue these and they're not square. And your build is basically all for nothing if you get to that point. So for me, I'm going to go with a 50 grain brass hidden insert so I can worry about squaring later. But if you don't have one of these or you're not willing to buy them, don't even bother getting into arrow building. This is an absolutely crucial tool. I can't overstate the importance of spinning and squaring your arrows. And if you're using a half out or a more standard non-hidden insert, you have to do it now in the process. So if you're using more of a normal insert system like the half out that the arrow comes with, then it's going to be very simple. All you're going to do is get an even layer, not too much, less is more with this stuff, of epoxy on your half out. You're going to place it in with a small twist all the way as you go down and wipe off any excess. After that, you're going to let these stand in an arrow tube upside down like this for at least 24 hours. I typically do 2 days. Very easy if you're using a half out. Now I'm going to use the hidden insert, so it's a little bit more complicated, but it's still not that bad. So I'm going to take my insert, still a little bit runnier than I'd like, but it'll be okay as long as I don't move these inserts anywhere. So I've got some epoxy on there. I'm going to start to work it in, twisting slowly as I go. And then once I get to that point, I need to take the hidden insert tool, which is going to seat it to the correct depth. And then slowly twist and back it out, making sure I can feel that I'm not pulling the insert back out with me. After that, wipe off my tool, wipe off any excess from there. And I'm going to make sure that I lay these flat. If you're using a hidden insert, you have to make sure that these lay flat for at least 24 hours. Like I say, typically I go 2-3 days. So I'll do another one with you guys here on camera. Just a little layer of glue. Less is more with this stuff. I'm going to slowly twist as it goes in as far as I can push it. And then my tool is going to do the rest for me. And I'm still twisting till it seats and get that tool out of the way. And that's really all that's to it. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of these. And then in 2 or 3 days, when I come back, that's when I'm going to square. So after these have dried, I'll be able to screw a broadhead into them, and I'll put them on the arrow spinner just like I showed you guys before. And it's wrong side. And if they spin square on the first go, perfect. And I suspect some of them will. Then that's perfect, and that arrow is just simply done and good to go. But if they don't spin square, then what I need to do is square them. So that's where this component comes in. I put a little piece of sticky sandpaper here on the end of that tool, and I'm essentially just going to grind down the end of that shaft and keep testing it on the spinner, trial and error, until it spins perfect. And once it spins perfect, I'll never have to worry about it again. Remember, I'm only able to do that after the fact, after gluing, because I'm using a hidden insert. For those of you using the standard inserts or the ones that come with the arrow, you don't have the option to do that. And it's not a bad thing. This is just my preference because I've got so many of these hidden inserts in my shop. I figure I better use some of them up. But the fact that they're both a 50 grain non-aluminum option, they're basically the same thing. In fact, I could take one of those half outs and put it on one of these arrows here, throw it in with the dozen, and it would shoot exactly the same. So there you folks have it, my complete arrow build with one arrow. I still have to fletch up all the rest of those, but I'll time that with a Blue Jays game and I'll come back and hammer it out. It's just time consuming and tedious, but you guys will get through it and you'll get really good at it. This whole process is a lot of fun, and it's so rewarding when you know you have a dozen beautifully built arrows that you did all by yourself. And when you take these arrows out and shoot something with it, man, there's no feeling like that. Looking at all the work you've put into your own bow and all the work you've put into your own arrows, it's just so rewarding. So for me, I have 1 out of 11 arrows done minus squaring. I've got to let these sit for 2-3 days, and then I'm going to square them and they'll be done. But for those of you that use the inserts that came with your arrows or anything with an exposed piece, you guys are done. After the glue sets and dries and you give it that time for the epoxy to cure, you guys are done and ready to shoot. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out the arrow at toothofthearrowbroadheads.com. These are what I'm shooting. We started building these to my specs because this is what I wanted to shoot myself, so we created it. I truly believe it's the best bow hunting arrow on the market, and that premium quality does not need to cost a fortune. Check them out today at toothofthearrowbroadheads.com, and thank you guys so much for joining me on this arrow building video.